1 is framing. Structural violence is a moral exclusion which is flawed because exclusion based on arbitrarily perceived difference. When turn lane 1. To recognize structural violence, questions will that you lead to unconscious supporting. We must be vigilant and loosen press invisible aspects, inclusion thinking. Can be caused structural violence if non-netable where it affects the same structures which feed violence cause abuse to empower citizens to reduce it. Thus, the standards mitigating structural violence. And there is a can create material change in the real world or counterproductive and threaten actual solution to oppression. Cray 14. The gap between what is actual in the world and what is represented by theories and politics or debate or certain real discussion about the concrete nature of oppression. What distinguishes there is the idealization and exclusion of the actual where we're seeking to resolve thought is in fact incomplete, incorrect, or relevant to actual problems. And part 2 is the plan. Student reporters are becoming more and more necessary, but current privilege laws don't cover them. That's Crane 16. New study analyzes laws across the nation that grants journalists right to protect confidential sources, finding that they rarely apply to student journalists. Study analyzes shield laws from across the country, finding that only Maryland and West Virginia explicitly protect student journalists as media reporting substance from student media provided coverage of their community on larger scale than before. And there is not a federal shield statute. Article argues for strengthening of shield laws and to extend them to protect student journalists, more high school and college journalists, and full-time professional journalists. Many students are forming their own news organizations, and thus the plan. The United States federal government should give student reporters the right to protect the identity of confidential sources. That's Salkin 11. Many media law researchers Congress might take in federal legislation to extend protection to student journalists. Federal standard defines an individual when he or she is involved in processing to generate truthful information to public. Clarify that intent does not have to result in actual dissemination. A student could still expectation with no publication defense. Approach lays down expectation that students produce work of publishable quality. Journalists and students are deserving of protection. Journalists and students are held accountable by faculty and department to every other standard. Their work under more difficult condition must convince their sources to give good information. Journalists and students should be aware we claim they have to reporters privilege plain meaning a document utilized by courts. Students will not enjoy protection. Federal law may adjust the problem should do so to recognize and support efforts of next wave of journalists. And part 3 is warming. The new generation is critical to stop climate change. Strong campus activism and journalism is key. Man 18. Too often our politicians do the bidding of powerful vested interests. We can still prevent the worst impacts of climate change. We are seeing a reawakening of student involvement in activism today. Students finding their voices and changing the world. Fossil fuel divestment campaign is spread across college campuses. More than $6 trillion in holdings of influence. Students are making their voices heard writing about the climate crisis. And student journalist involvement is suppressed by lack of legal protection. The plan is key. Lamont 17. Students are invisible army behind headlines. Student mortifying drinking newsrooms with newsroom employment down 42%. Overworked professionals are regularly being scooped. Student occupy second-class legal status. Lack any meaningful legal protection if government tries to expose their anonymous sources to leaving students police or prosecutors demand their no censorship legitimized by U.S. Supreme Court. And student journalism is necessary to truthfully spread the message of campus activism. Mass media distorts activism and fuels elites. That's Zhou Act 16. Responsibility of student newspapers and activism to report as fairly as possible. Student reporters are role is to give everyone a voice in campus activism. JHU newsletter student newspaper coverage represents first step in spreading their activism to a wider audience. National media security against student activism with student newspapers bridge. That gap brings wider attention to student campus activist goals. They lend activists a platform through which they can express their views. And climate change disproportionately harms marginalized communities. That's Year 10. If a community is inhabited by people of color, it could chance of receives less protection disproportionate benefits of wealthy, treated human health for profit, legitimate human exposure, harmful substances, low income, and minority communities continue to bear the greater health and environmental burdens. Geographic distribution correlated to abandoned toxic waste dumps is by either race or income. And part 4 is academic corruption. Academic institutions are overwhelmingly corrupt. Multiple warrants. Vader 17. Colleges maximize revenue to lure students to attend whose schools know are likely to fail to graduate, financially burdening large numbers of students to maintain comfortable jobs for faculty. Universities have created vocationally insecure academic underclass to teach full professionals to teach only 3 hours a week. Big-time commercial intercollegiate athletics with broad economic exploitation of players to benefit coaches and administrators. Colleges and universities have used flat system of federal student financial aid to aggressively raise student fees. And our reporter's privilege is key to expose corruption in academic institutions. Who 14. A student reporter excluded from reporter's privilege could be deterred from reporting stories that would expose them to exposures, increases likelihood of reporter self-censorship. It also leads to self-censorship on the part of informants. They are more likely to refrain from exposing misconduct, might limit the scope of information they share. Earliest perception of media is that reporters cannot be trusted. Unlikely their views will change later. Privileging student reporters that serves as a check on the government, schools, and school boards. And this acts as a form of radical resistance capable of deconstructing capitalism. Opens up forms of dialogue that reveal hidden structures that act as a material and realistic response to oppression. That's Hudson 99. What is required to recognize schools cannot be analyzed separately from struggles to create non-exploitative society. Practice education capable of transforming those institutions and society itself. Material practices form the structure of daily experience. Hegemony functions through official discourse. Also, structured silence. Radical forms of resistance already employed by students develop effective pedagogical strategies. Opposition elements used by students wrest some power from the authority of the school. Actions of these students represent a realistic response to lived oppression and alienation embedded in the daily routine. Represents a crucial step in translating political understanding into political struggle that contests hegemonic practices of capitalist state itself. The non-authoritarian social relationships that support dialogue and communication are indispensable for questioning meaning and nature of knowledge and peeling away hidden structures. And capitalism is the root cause of social inequalities and leads to extinction. That's Harvard 15. Ecological and economic crises, militarism, surveillance state, and dysfunctional political system can all be traced back to its normal operation. Now in the midst of the 6th mass extinction pace is 1,000 times greater than the natural extinction rate. Capitalism also leads to explosive social inequalities. Economic landscape is littered with rising concentrations of debt, distress, and immiseration caused by austerity, pushing elites. About a quarter of children under the age of 5 live in poverty. Capitalism seeks to it seeks maximum profitability as a matter of first priority, set it on the chart of collision course with nature, treats human labor as a cost, class system, and class warfare are built into its DNA. And underview? A focus on materiality is key. Vague calls to action create totalitarian states. That's content 15. We have dozens of revolutions modeled. The historical record indicates they generally lead to totalitarian states. If you cannot imagine a potentially realizable alternative people will leap into, biological predispositions, hard work to invent better alternatives, not as enticing labor as peaceful, but if one does not provide a viable vision, Faulkner's that are offering produce visions that appear materially feasible. Ready for those?
Okay. Your solvency advocate card says that Congress should pass the plan. Will you defend that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start on this warming advantage.
Sure.
Where, if any, is there a link that says that confidential sources are vital to solve climate change?
Sure. So the Lamont 17 card talks about student journalists will not enter like journalism programs, will not like go into like newsrooms if they're scared of like being subpoenaed by the government.
Where? Read me a line that says subpoena by the government.
Sure. Students occupy second-class legal status, lack meaningful legal protection if a government tries to expose their anonymous sources, leaving students in peril if police or prosecutors demand their notes. Censorship legitimized by U.S. Supreme Court.
So it's talking about censorship. So there's
it's talking about like legal protection for
just
like
where in this line does it, in this card anywhere does it say confidential sources?
It says expose their anonymous sources.
Where?
Lack meaningful legal protection if government tries to expose their anonymous sources. Says that in the card.
So I guess why does that resolve climate change?
Sure. So the Man 18 card specifically isolates why the next generation is critical to stop this. There have been like activist movements on campus that have like led to divestment away from fossil fuels. They've like raised trillions.
So has that changed the fact that Trump pulled out of the Paris Agreement, has defunded the EPA?
Sure.
And,
so
like, literally
the
said
argument
climate change
here
is a hoax?
is that activism is key to resolve things of like the government policies that like detract away from climate change. Like once like Trump pulled out of the climate accord, like campuses like all pledged to like do to do like sustainable.
But we're still not in.
Origin.
We're still not in Paris. Like the United States is still not agreed to
No, I
increase
know.
our emissions.
I'm
So
saying
what did
that.
those protests do?
So it's not just protests, right? It's like they have like pushed campuses to enact like green policies and like move to renewable energy sources. That is like a body movement.
So
of, like,
I guess my question is, in the status quo, if that's what they're doing, why is the AF key?
Sure. So the Zhou 16 card specifically talks about how campus activism is misconstrued by mass media, and that makes it like a lot easier for people to deny that it's true, for them to like dismiss campus activists and like make them out to be like the bad guys in the situation.
Wait,
Student journalists are necessary to like.
You just said the internal
link.
link is like campus activists innovate and like create new solutions to climate change.
Sure.
Why does the way they're portrayed matter?
The way they're portrayed matters is because to other like activists and like other college campuses, to like students on other college campuses, the way that like activists are portrayed.
The source
is, like,
seems
that.
to portray them pretty positively. Your academic corruption.
Yeah.
So prior restraint in Hosty ruled that school administrators are allowed to censor school newspapers. I guess why would they not censor any stories that exposed like unjust practices by the administration?
So the Who 14 card like cites examples of like students like doing this and like being able to like expose academic corruption. There are also like other avenues students can take, because it's not just they like work on like campus newspapers. That's like one avenue they can take. They also like work in like outside newsrooms as like interns and things like that, where they can publish like information.
Okay, so do they, if they work in outside newsrooms, get like the same protections in the AF?
Like as if they work on like a campus journal.
Actually, I'll send the doc. Is everyone good?
How many off?
4 off in case. Interpretation: the Atlas defended the term reporter refers to college-educated journalists who work for mainstream news organizations. Captain Durali 17. The term reporter is narrow. It suggests specifically that professionals learning college before commencing work for mainstream news organizations. Reporters are expected to report on the news. The violation: they defend students. Vote for limits, allowing students to make any app that defends people who write or publish any article on Twitter, Facebook, topical, which explodes net comfort and predictability, allows unpredictable advantages about individuals, obscure groups of bloggers, or organizations. Vote negative on substantive engagement. Otherwise, we're speaking without debating. There's nothing separating us from dueling oratory. It creates the most portable long-term skills where we learn to defend our beliefs in contexts like politics. Drop the debate on T, hold them accountable to interrupt topical advocacy frames the debate, drop the arguments and jump ship to a new layer, and drop the arg on T, same as dropping the debater since T indicts our advocacy. Competing interrupts since reasonability invites judge intervention based on preference rather than argumentation, and it encourages a race to the bottom, which debaters exploit judges' tolerance for questionable argumentations. No RBIs, they incentivize debaters to go all in on theory, baiting abusive practices, killing substantive class around other flow, and B, they can run theory and B2, which means one, it is reciprocal because we're really able to check abuse, 2 cures times Q since they can collapse their shell in the 2 hour. Next off. Counterpoint text: the Supreme Court of the United States should recognize a reporter's privilege for student reporters under common law. Under common law, Congress has functionally abdicated its role to granting privileges. The courts are closer near to the issue and solve the case better. Nestler 05. Because of contradictory appellate court rulings and confusion, judges are unsure of legal status and privilege claims that have led to worse journalism. Any hope for a restoring relationship between the press and judiciary is a greater degree of certainty is required. Lower courts are without guidance and have culture of the Supreme Court to have clearer issues that are better suited to make decisions than Congress. Congress has basically asked the courts to be the arbiter of journalist privilege. Next is the basis that Trump's base approval is high now despite recent legal disputes. Stewart 827. And news sort of polls confirm that they are still in count for unwavering support in political electorate. Trump's popularity is taking an increased focus on criminals around him to make things worse, and Trump capitalizes on anti-journalist rhetoric to make his base distrust the media. The plan causes him to question it. Jones and Son 17. Trump employs press enemy rhetoric to consolidate support among the base by transforming the media into an enemy. Trump ensures negative information becomes part of the lying press that considers the war on Trump and country more important to be the press as an enemy. Trump can control the narrative, allowing to put travel about controversial policies, and Trump maintaining his campaign promises, Trump's main campaign promises to declare war on the press, including student journalists. The app is a flip-flop that anchors the base. Peters 17. Trump warning war with the media, calling journalists as destroy human beings. The administration would hold the press accountable. Trump would fight back student journalists. Student journalists will face the same charges as professionals. It will be the shape of freedom and information act. Student press is sexually valuable, and administrator and fighting anti-Trump press rhetoric. And loss of course support causes Trump to lash out with nuclear weapons. Street 16. Trump policies that support supporters could increase the possibility of a U.S. diversionary war. Trump would have the sole authority to launch nukes and would be a critical president wields enough power to destroy entire people and entire continent. Tensions rising quickly emerge domestic political dynamics, and Trump presidency might drive Washington behavior internationally. If Trump does not sufficiently satisfy reporters, these will spend poor fuel to the flames at home or quickly spread abroad. The next administration will find themselves with a range of extremely powerful tools, including nuclear weapons, that would be too tempting to resist. And next is the shutdown decide. The GOP flatters Trump now to avoid shutdown, but partisan bills disrupts bipartisanship and causes Trump overreaction. Patalia 18. Republicans are flattering Trump out of shutting down this month. Reply is returning to GOP is unified. Message budgets through the walls already being built. There's no reason to shut down. Trump wrestles with whether or not the GOP leaders and vice trust on impulsive instincts. Lawmakers financialized support current funding since October 13 are unable to know Trump's veto. GOP leaders are trying to avoid messy fights ahead of the midterm. The smartest thing we can do is just put together bipartisan bills and crossify the link from the other. Just that the bill is not bipartisan. Second is that it creates more crowd in the legislative agenda, which forces Congress to have to get through more information so that they can't get to spending bills. And federal education is polarized. It causes pugnacious Congress for fighting, and GOP backlash is perceived as inherently ineffective. Well, now 12 national policies drive education policy, according to distinguished NASA more than ever, often bitter ever disagreement of education policy is disrupted. Federal policies and education are inextricably linked. Education policies apparently not born out of repugnancy to do with the DOJ. Congress has become more poisonous and difficult, and education has been polarized by institutions bringing about change. The president should not link to radical right and rethinking school financing and long-term tradition of ancient leadership by supporting new agenda. We're not going to get out there without specific disruption. And shutdown hurts hurricane relief. FEMA employees are let off. It destroys social welfare and hurts those in poverty. Golden 18. Congress for shutting down the government. When the shutdown actually happens, it calls attention to the fact that government are made people. Essential employees like FEMA, for example, step back and are functioning when they don't have any jobs to support the Americans who interact with government benefits. Those Americans will be better off than those living in poverty under shutdown because Social Security and Medicare are exempt. And hurricanes disproportionately impact low-income communities that do not have resources to evacuate. Currently happening in the status quo. Resting 18. Hurricane Florence is a powerful solution that has lashed in the Carolinas and has serious hazard that will cause a disaster of 1.4 million people who must evacuate. People who refuse to leave. Those who don't have disabilities. Hurricane Katrina caused people who refuse to evacuate orders cast in negative light. People who refuse Hurricane Katrina were last financially secure. Now, the case debate. Surveillance circumvents the plan to deter sources. Pottery 17. The threat of surveillance is a major threat on chilling sources. Increased risk of exposure to the impact on financial sources sharing information. Digital technology training has a chilling effect on investigative journalism. Concerned as a digital community as surveillance is being conducted. Skip the next card. Skip the next two cards. On advantage one, their scenario is ludicrous. They think that student journalists will people get confidential sources that it is so damning that Trump would revise his climate change policy when he's explicitly pulled out of Paris and the EPA. The return link is just is ludicrous, and that's the most recent data proves Trump caused a spike in civic engagement and political activism, which means the advantage is non-unique. Link 4-6 Trump election inspired Americans progressive laterally to increase their movement in political activism. The day after Trump election, average women protested in the streets since Vietnam War. During war months, supporters universal health care, hundreds of Republican lawmakers at town halls, Democrats, and it's especially skyrocketed. Teens working in their high schools are more influential in gun safety movements in the United States has seen in decades. Cut the card at decades, on the next advantage, Hazelwood is an all-cause. It allows schools to censor info regardless. Bainbridge 17 and Tinker, the court ruled that the government were allowed administration to curtail students in part of speech as a staggering the free speech found in Hazelwood. The court could allow the school disseminating students' rights to free speech as the moments they passed through school gates. Hazelwood made student journalists more vulnerable to censorship. Hazelwood created scholarship student goals different than the professional standards. Students officially are not legally obligated to have qualified journalism and justify their acts of censorship depending on school journalist concerns.
So on this base dissat, so like the I Am the Resistance article like pretty clearly shows there were people like within Trump's base who like actively like disagree with his policies. So like why does he still retain his base?
Well, sure. Just because people disagree, just because his advisors don't agree with his policies doesn't mean that like super far right GOP conservatives who are citizens don't.
Okay, sure. On the counterplan, so you say like courts are like closer to the issue. Why is that true?
Yeah, so the concept of reporter's privilege is a court doctrine. So what happens is in courts, the court says journalists do not have to give up their sources because they could get subpoenaed and they have that privilege, which was established in Brandenburg by the Supreme Court, which means that it is a question of their jurisdiction on this issue and they're better equipped to resolve it.
Sure. So on the surveillance like argument,
yeah.
So why would the government invest in like surveilling like student journalists?
Well, so if student journalists were the only ones with privilege and like Trump
but they're not. There are other journalists who have like
no, they
more
don't.
privilege.
Brandon, you have said that student journalists ought to get the right to protect confidential sources.
Yeah.
No other sources have that privilege because of Brandenburg, which is why we wrote a T argument and also just like what the topic says.
Wait, okay, so I'm saying
the reason why people defend
they...
apps that aren't yours is because other journalists don't have
so
that.
I'm saying why would the government invest in surveilling like student journalists?
Well, so if it's true that your advantage is so damning to like climate change and would reorient and cause so much political backlash.
Wait, why would it cause political backlash?
Because your whole advantage is student activism key to stop climate change.
Sure, so what does that have to do with
So my argument is that obviously like goes against Trump's policy prerogatives and agenda. If your advantage is true, that it would have such a profound impact that it would not allow us to like for Trump to be like climate news is fake, then he would surveil them to deter them from publishing that.
Sure. So on the advantage one, you said that it won't cause Trump to revise his climate policy. But if like campus activists are like moving in the direction like divesting away from fossil fuels, why wouldn't he revise his climate policy? Like there just seems to be no more.
Because he's not going to
argument.
flip. Because a couple students were like, we think warming is bad.
But you have
Trump thinks that like climate science is fake. He's pulled out of the Paris agreements and defunded the EPA. If you think that a couple like school journalists publishing some articles about global warming is going to change the GOP's position on climate change, then you're then you're mistaken.
Let's go on to advantage two. So you say that Hazelwoods are all causes, but like there are students who like go into like newsrooms and like intern there. Why would that deter them from like publishing about like academic corruption?
Okay, so like if you wanna if your internal link to your scenario is student journalists will be given a right if they get them in professional settings.
It's not just in professional settings.
Why would
if they can publish it in like interning in newsrooms, why would Hazelwood stop them, like be able to censor them?
Why would your app be inherent if that's true? If we could just go to newsrooms and publish, our argument is that school corruption is reported on in unless it's a huge scandal that would already get national media attention, is reported in school newspapers. Like CNN isn't concerned with one minor sort of violation or administrative policy.
Sure, that's fine.
I'm gonna go blow my nose.
32 left. Sitting at the top. Everyone got it. So it's going to be overview T, politics dissad, then Congress, and then SCOTUS counterplan, and then the shutdown dissad.
Wait, I'm confused. There's like a K in this doc.
Which doc did I send you?
Yeah.
Oh, I might have sent you the wrong one. Hold on.
I'm pretty sure I didn't read AfroPress.
Okay, we good now?
No, what's the order again?
Okay, so it's going to be overview, AC, then T, then the politics dissad, SCOTUS counterplan, and the shutdown DA. Good?
Yep.
Overview to the 1AC student journalists are more susceptible than any other journalist to subpoenas. The plan is key to keep students involved. Purge is key to allowing students to check academic institutions. So local government actors lack of privilege encourage self-censorship and chill services. This acts as a material resistance strategy students can use to disrupt the launch of capitalism, solve back for massive social inequalities and extinction. I'm not going to go for the warming advantage, but I'll answer this surveillance argument. One, it's not going to happen to student journalism. The plan is very specific about how student journalists are able to check on academic corruption. There's no reason why the federal government will want to surveil student journalists. Enterprise. They're just checking local government actors and the school. On the advantage, he just says this Hazelwood's law for censorship, but students can work in independent newsrooms. Also, the things they're reporting about won't be censored by the government. Also, if they work in newsrooms, and they're not going to face the censorship that's brought on by Hazel, which means that there's literally no defense on this advantage, which means that it outweighs because capitalism leads to things like extinction, inequality, and enterprise doesn't contest the internal links that we lead to a deconstructing these systems of capital. That's a reason why the case outweighs. On the T-shell. First. Counter-interpreting affirmative readers may define reporters as an individual involved in gathering truthful information. That's talking 11. He defines an individual when he or she is involved in a process intended to generate truthful information to the public. This is a key to depth of education because we learn about changes we can do in order to challenge systems like capital. That's a reason why it outweighs on the T-shell because challenging these systems when as being students and all those other things we can do in order to challenge these systems net good. On his counter-interpretation, he just says explosive limits. No, you still get he says explosive limits, but no, you still get links to most often. So you can still read against it, which means there's no reason why you get any when you get any ground loss or anything like that just because we're defending student journalists. Also, when they're involved in disseminating information to the public, there are still checks on that. I.e., wouldn't defend just like a random people who don't do it on a regular basis. So we can just defend one blogger who blogs at one time, which is the reason why it doesn't make sense. On the he said, but for some engagement, sure, we allow for depth of education, which means we control the internal links of some education. Within we can have this engagement is if we have a depth of education. Onto the politics dissad. First, uniqueness overwhelms the links. Trump place will never waver. Stewart 827. New set of polls confirms some kind of the unbrain sort of portion of the electorate is the string of negative headlines to provide the American public's never changed that much. The Trump base is always on board with some polls have shown voters who really like Trump stay by him no matter what he does. People refund approval is usually unstable during the first 18 months in office. Trump's personal focus on his base enables Trump to hang on to most with GOP supporters, which means that uniqueness overwhelms the link. Then turn the plan increases support for Trump key members of the base of publicly supported reporters privilege along 618. President Trump said top GOP allies and Congress actively pursue legislative journalists. The need for federal media shield laws even more critical as infuriated first Amendment advocates the legislation identified as bipartisan legislation called by back in 2007 when Paul Ryan replied, I supported Jefferson had a study stream of attacks on the press on Capitol Hill. Mike Jordan, Madison, and other Trump allies advocating for a reporter who broke the story that Russian spies tried to recruit Carter Page. Press freedom is an area where liberals and libertarian-minded conservatives see eye to eye about our respect and love for the Bill of Rights. On the SCOTUS counterplay. Congressional action is key. Other actors can ensure effective and durable implementation. That's Porter 7. Placing privilege in the hands of the judicial system and inherent in rules leaves a journal privilege created on shaky ground will be subject to changeability of common line face, clarity and notice problems for journalists and sources. Congressional action assure requisite clarity for court journalists and sources with institutionalized balance to ensure interests of journalists and government protected, which means this is the only way to strike a balance between the interests of journalists and government, also the only way to effect a durable and effective implementation, which is the reason why that's a unique net benefit to the app. On the shutdown decide. On the shutdown decide, you can cross-apply the argument I read on the politics decide that the plan increased support for Trump. It's a bipartisan legislation because Republicans also support it because they also want they don't want restriction on free speech, which is the reason why I wouldn't trigger the impact, even on the why I wouldn't trigger the impact to the decide, even on the impact level. They say that shutdown hurts hurricane relief, but we control the internal link. Things like capitalism is what leads to things like warming and social inequality, which is the reason why we control the internal link to increase hurricanes. Because when there's things like warming that leads to increase like natural disasters like hurricane, insofar as he has conceded that capitalism is the cause of those kinds of things like warming and natural disasters, and also low-income communities being disproportionately affected. That's a reason why the case will always outweigh the dissent.
There wasn't a permutation made on the counterplan, right?
No.
Okay. topicality, the base disad, then the Congress counterplan, or the SCOTUS counterplan, then the other disad. Yeah.
And the EC.
Yeah. Is everyone good?
Yeah.
Okay. Not going for topicality, they've conceded they do not get an RVI on it because it destroys substantive clash and engagement. I'm not going for the Trump disad. I'll concede uniqueness overwhelms the link. His base sticks with him no matter what, which means that the link turn doesn't generate offense for them because his base is still with him post the 1AC or in a world without the 1AC. The Congress counterplan. They have not made a permutation, which means that if I win the counterplan resolves the 1AC better, then that is a reason to vote negative. We do the exact same thing as the AF. We pass the exact same policy. It's just sort of Congress rules instead of the legislative branch. Congress solves better. They are closer to the issue. The conflict that was set up in Brandenburg and whether or not journalists should or not get protection is a congressional doctrine that needs to be clarified within Congress to overview current confusion, which the 1AC doesn't. But it still solves the entirety of the case because because the Supreme Court functionally says that student journalists have a privilege, and so in the Supreme Court, or not only in the Supreme Court, but in all other courts, whenever students are subpoenaed or testified, they would be able to invoke that privilege because the Supreme Court granted it to them, which means it solves what I see because we passed the exact same policy just through Congress. Their congressional action implementation card, key argument is not good. It says that the status quo is confusing because there's not a clear precedent or a sort of correction on the law. Our argument is that the counterplan would resolve that confusion because it would force the Supreme Court to rule that student journalists have a right to protection, which solves the case. Even then, so here are more cards that say Congress is the necessary actor. Levine 14. Rulings in direct conflict with the courts on opposite sides of holding in their interpretations of Brandenburg. Lack of consensus among critical have obvious consequences. Absent uniformity on federal, constitutional, and common law. The direct ruling is a result of circuits have divided the meaning of Powell and explanation of Brandenburg that only further guides that courts can be appealed in federal law, providing litigants the exact appeal. And perception is key. Absent a SCOTUS ruling, the privilege is incredible, which means the 1AC would get rolled back, not the AF. That turns their argument. Levine 05. The subpoenas are being enforced through punitive measures that are unparalleled severity. For any reporter to make it credible, pledge the court's intervention is urgently needed to clarify the existing precedent which reporters can make a progress on sort of confidentiality with respected by judiciary, which says that congressional action is key and is the only way to resolve their AF advantage. They say it is not durable. We get durable fiat, which is key sort of a negative ground in testing. Obviously, every single AF would get rolled back because Trump hates all of them. But sort of durable fiat is key sort of to testing the AF at the most metrics because anything would get rolled back. If there's no durable fiat, then you should vote neg on presumption because the AF would get rolled back by Trump, which means any risk of a disad means that you negate. Now the shutdown disad. You conceded that we will avoid shutdown right now in the status quo because Republican legislators aren't advancing sort of controversial rulings and there hasn't been much legislative change going on in the status quo. There are multiple links to the plan that cause it to shut down. First is that it adds more to the agenda. It requires more Senate committee hearings, more agenda sort of discussions, and sort of more voting to occur in the Senate, which slows down current legislative agenda and shuts the government down since they won't be able to get to funding and other measures by their deadline, which is in September. The second is that educational policy is extremely controversial. You conceded a link that the DOE has specifically been a topic of controversy, and the way that sort of educational legislation has been occurring is bad. The 1AC links to this because they sort of regulate what students in college campuses can or cannot do, which obviously requires the Department of Education to oversee and enforce the 1AC, which would cause sort of outcry between the Republicans and Democrats who don't like sort of pro-democratic education funding and those who do not. The final link is that the plan is immensely unpopular. It is not bipartisan. Shield laws have been proposed in Congress multiple times, and they've always never passed because Republicans dislike them and don't hate them. The new recent op-ed proves Trump has declared a war on the media and even student journalists that says that he hates them. The only piece of evidence they've read on this question is awful. I will read you the line. They have miscut it. They say that they've said that top GOP allies in Congress prefer journalists. No, quote, one of President's top GOP allies aggressively pursues legislation projecting journalists, and he's is the leader of the House Freedom Caucus. Just because one Republican likes the plan doesn't mean that the rest of them like the plan. There's still a ton of controversy, which is why a shield law has never passed Congress, ever. And representatives like Senator Inhofe and other government officials who think national security is more important than discussion of shield law would vote negative. Now you've conceded the impact, which is that a shutdown would destroy minorities and other groups during the current hurricane season in North Carolina, because there would be people who are not able to respond, give them resources, give them food, or ability to evacuate, which would leave 1.4 million people in shambles and causes massive structural violence against those who are disabled or in poverty, which links to their structural violence framework. And it's about independently. You've also conceded it causes Medicare and Medicaid to get cut in terms of funding, which means people who are on healthcare won't be able to get access to that if the government shuts down, which is a large impact and affects a mass amount of people. Now, their only response to the cap solves the internal link. Obviously, the 1AC does not resolve all of capitalism. The exposing student corruption in sort of schools is one instance of capitalism, but that doesn't change the fact that there are big banks or privatization in the United States that Donald Trump is in office prefer our scenario because it has a sort of a strength of link, and the amount of time it would take to deconstruct capitalism is much longer than hurricane relief. Everyone who wouldn't be able to evacuate the hurricanes, like what happened in Puerto Rico, would be dead before we could see the demise of capitalism, which means there is an immediacy and time frame argument that is made on the dissad that outweighs the case in the counterplan. Finally, the case debate, the last argument I will go for is that they do not solve their own advantage. Administrators are able to censor school journalists in the status quo, which is why people never speak about corruption. They would still be deterred because sources would not want to be expelled or have the administration crack down on them when they find out, even if they went to alternative news outlets. And this also assumes that journalists are able to just go to CNN and report on things. It's hard to get a job there. It is hard to post stories, which means they do not solve their advantage.
122 left. AC, then counterplan to that. Everyone good? On the one, I see student journalists are more susceptible than any other journalist to subpoenas. The plan is key to keep students involved. Approach is key to allowing students to check academic institution and local government actor. Lack of privilege encourages self-censorship and chills. Sources as act checks as a material resistance strategy students can use to disrupt the logic of capitalism and solve back for massive social inequalities and extinction. You have conceded the Hudson evidence. We don't have to. It's not contingent on winning that we overthrow the entire government or all the big banks. Rather, it's very specific that small act of material resistance, i.e., doing things like writing in newspapers and about academic corruption, is key to disrupt the system of capitalism within academia and within institution, which is a reason why we are able to disrupt the logic of capitalism, which means we can get to access the impacts of the 1AC advantage. Your only response is that administrators will crack down on students. But first of all, they can go to alternative news sources. You say it's hard to get a job at CNN. We're not saying they have to go to CNN. Rather, we're saying they can go to local news sources and things like news outlets in order to tell their stories, which is a reason why they are not affected by the Hazelwood censorship precedent, and the reason why they can always go to other sources, and a reason why they will always be able to form these resistance strategies even if they don't report it out of the campus newspapers. Also, you missed the second argument that censorship is not going to crack down on every single every single paper they write in the campus newspaper, which is a reason why even if they get a few stories out there that are damning and able to be transparent to local government actors and also things like academic institutions, that is a reason why just those a few stories are able to disrupt the logic of capitalism, and is a reason why we still get access to those impacts. On the Scopes counterground, you say first of all, you say that CP results confuse you. No, the Porter's 07 card is specifically said by congressional actor is key, and why Scopes is just a loss for confusion between the source and the reporter, which is the reason why this sense of confusion is a way that the government will use in order to not grab protection, which is a reason which is a huge solvency deficit to the counterplan. Is a reason why the congressional action is a key and more transparent and able to resolve this confusion, and a reason why the Congress and the actor will actually lead to even more clear policies, which is why they're a net better actor. You say that SCOTUS has the ability to invoke privilege. We also say that Congress passing a federal shield law is also able to invoke privilege and give reporters the right to refuse the identity, which is there's literally no solvency deficit of 1AC. You say you get durable fiat, but it doesn't matter if the common law changes, but if the common law changes, then it means the ruling also changes, which is a reason why durable fiat does not protect you, and a reason why you can never solve as well as the after, because the Congress as an actor is a lot more clear on the shutdown decide. You totally misconstrued the card I read on the 116 evidence is pretty clear about how there are multiple President Trump's top GOP allies in Congress who actively pursue legislation to protect journalists. That's a line from the card. It's not just one source. It cites multiple instances like Pence and people like that who are top allies who protect this source, which is the reason why it's a bipartisan legislation. It does not trigger the impact to the dissad, and even so, case outweighs. That's the capitalism extinction impact I read at the top of the 1AC.